Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code expediting firm. Today I have Patrick Beesley from Runwise. Patrick, welcome aboard.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we talk about the power of people. I always start the show. Never met you before. Met a gentleman at a networking function. And he said, hey, look, we do this thing. I heard you got a podcast. I really got a great guy that could come on your show. And you and I ended up chatting. We had a great conversation, and the world is small. Yeah. You've been on another podcast, and it happens to be someone that I knew that's in the energy world. And I invited you along because I think that there's a lot of questions about Local Law 97. So, first of all, nobody wakes up in New York City and goes, hey, I think I want to be in the energy world with Local Law 97. So tell us a little bit about your career, where you went to college, how you ended up going to this path, because it clearly didn't start here the day you got out of college. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so born and raised in New Jersey, spent pretty much my entire college in various places in New Jersey, Rutgers, NJIT, ended up going to Stevens for my master's. At the time, I wanted to do something in the environmental space. I knew environmental was important in some aspects. Did a lot of consulting work, soil, water, air quality, things that were important. Kind of got stuck. Didn't really love it. Ended up at Schneider Electric for a decade.
Oh, wow.
Did a lot of work with them and building, more efficient buildings, getting more into like the microgrids, the sustainability space. And that's really where I got hooked on sustainability and the power of, or rather the impact that the built environment has on carbon emissions and climate change as a whole and sustainability, because you don't realize how much really goes into these buildings and how much they use.
Right.
Long story short, that got me towards Runwise, which, we can talk about more, but really that got me to say, I want to make like a real impact. When you work for a big company as great as they were, the impact, it's hard to feel, right, as a person. Whereas,
collectively, they make a big impact, but
Exactly.
individually, there's so many pieces to it.
If you want to feel it as yourself, right? So I found Runwise, and, I've been here for a bit now, and you can actually see the impact day in and day out of the actual
Because there's a direct correlation,
Exactly.
right?
And so that's really
you're
how I
going
ended
in,
up here.
as we start to talk about a building, you go in, you see the inefficiencies, you put things in place, you put sensors in place, you put technology in place, and then you go and you can do a presentation and say, look, this is what's going on in your building. You're kind of like an EKG of the heating system.
Exactly.
You
between me and my partners,
downs.
I've got one piece of it, they've got the others, and we all work together to say, here's some of the things you can do. So that was my path to this world. It kind of started broad, got narrower and narrower and narrower.
Now you found
exactly.
So how long have you been doing this with Runwise?
Runwise just over a year.
Okay.
I lead all their partner efforts and large client efforts.
Wow.
So anybody in New York,
Sounds pretty impressive.
I work with consultants, auditors,
Everybody.
analysts, service people, you name it.
Anybody who needs help.
That's who I work with.
So, I was saying to an architect that was on another show that I've kind of gotten tired of the 421A, the 485X, and Local Law 97 conversations. But every time I dive in and I meet another person to talk about it, I learn something new. And I learn a lot about what I do on my end, Patrick, is there's a book, it's got a set of laws, and you think you read it, and it looks really clear, and then you go to the agency that enforces it, and what looked crystal clear to you, you leave there shaking your head going, oh my God, this isn't as simple and as easy as it looked. So with Local Law 97, there's these mandatory dates that are there, and they have this path for you. But if it was that easy, there wouldn't be all the consultants and there wouldn't be all the chatter about it. So tell us a little bit about your niche in the market of what, and I know a little bit about it, but what is your niche in the market and what is your added value to these developers that have potentially just finished the building or existing buildings, which I think is the bigger market, right? You got existing 20-unit buildings, and they're running on old equipment.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean rip everything out. And I think that's really what I wanted you to talk a little bit about, that it's not just rip it all out and go to electric. There's a process and there's a path.
So with 97, you're right. There's so many different pathways. They actually, call them pathways in the law, which is funny. One of them, or two or three of them, specifically point towards a more advanced building control system, something like what Runwise can provide. And there's a reason for it. It's the way most buildings in New York and Chicago, Boston, you name it,
The biggest cities.
run. Is a technology that came out in like the 70s or 80s. It says, tell me if it's cold outside, I'm going to turn your building heat on,
Right.
or I'm going to turn your air conditioning on. They're both run the same way,
Right.
which was great when you had nothing.
Right.
But nowadays, buildings, as you know, are pretty well insulated. And so the reason that these rules are in these pathways is because they say, hey, instead of just looking outside,
Look inside.
the building, see what the people are actually feeling, and you can run the building more efficiently. And
Wait a second, that sounds like common sense.
it kind of is. But it takes a law, I guess, to get people to start moving in the right direction.
Well, because, if you grew up like me in New York City, right? My father owned buildings, and the people had their own thermostats, and they would just put it on 74.
Yeah.
They didn't care what was going on outside. They didn't care what was going on inside.
Yeah.
And my father, back in the day, they just like, oh, okay, that works. It goes on, it goes off. It's perfect.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Carlton, who's one of the founders of the company, he worked for a property management company, and he would look at buildings that were side by side identical, completely different heating bills.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what he said, I gotta start to look more into this.
Right.
Because this doesn't make any sense.
Got to do a deep dive.
But so that's kind of like where we and these kind of solutions fit into 97 is like we're in these pathways for a reason.
Right.
It makes sense. Like you said, it's common sense to look in the building and say, what do the people actually feel like? And it comes more in play as we see bigger fluctuations in temperature throughout the days, throughout the months and weeks.
Right.
Where
Like yesterday, it was raining and it was warm, and then the wind kicked up today, and it's it's 15 to 20 degrees cooler.
So yesterday you might not have needed as much heat, but outside it was probably below that threshold, and a lot of buildings were overheating just by default.
Just by default.
No one caused it. It's just by default.
And it's automatic.
Exactly.
It's not like someone's watching it going,
Yeah.
hey, I'm in the control room and, this makes no sense. Why is it doing it?
Your super's probably fixing a door or a window. He's doing something else in the building. He's not down there all the time.
And it's funny, a lot of the people what they were saying, a lot of different people that run facilities and different things is that overheating and oversupplying, bringing the hot water in at a temperature. I was up at a SCUP, which is the Society for College University Programming, and they were talking about facilities up in Massachusetts that they would start at this point. By the time they got the hot water to the building, because they worked on a main plant, it was so inefficient that it made more sense to cut the pipe and put their own boiler in.
Yeah.
But it took them 35 years to figure that out. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Meanwhile, you could have just put a sensor on and then knew it.
And yeah, I mean, some of the things you see in buildings that go unchecked is kind of astounding. Things like that go unchecked for years. So one of the things we see a lot is and this goes to that inefficiencies. Like it just makes sense to have something that's giving you more data than just an outdoor temperature. So a lot of what we also do, and we're not the only ones, but other companies will do it, is we look at all the key components of these assets that cost you a lot of money in these buildings. New boilers running you $250,000 to $500,000 or more. Right. They're pretty expensive. So what we do is we monitor specific things, and one of the biggest ones is water. Water, as great as it is it will kill your boiler if you don't use it in the right way.
If you're not right, because it
and a lot of
keeps
times
circulating the same water.
So leaks go unchecked. You bring in new water, over-treated water, things like that. It just deteriorates that incredibly expensive asset that now you need to factor in to buy sooner than 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Instead of getting your life expectancy, it's shorter.
So again, 97 is saying, hey, we want to reduce carbon emissions, but a lot of what they're telling you to do makes sense because it's helping you avoid larger expenses.
In the long run.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the life expectancy on the equipment through local law 97 helps you to maintain the equipment and maintain it. So I know when we spoke a little bit about the products that you have, is part of it is that you're able to put these sensors. So tell us a little bit about how, like, on a bird's eye view, up in the sky, looking down, in general terms, without really being an engineer, but just common sense. So you have a building, it's got hot water, it's got steam, whatever. You come in, you circle around as the little birdie, and you're going to give us like the layman's term about what you would advise the owner on two levels. One is if you don't have to do all of local law 97, because I think a lot of people don't get that there's these milestones, but it's not all in or all out. There's certain things that you could start to do that maybe they don't check all the boxes on local 97, but if you invest some money, you're going to save money, so it just makes sense.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about that. Here's the heating system, here's what we could do for you, and this is what it is.
So before I say, I'll do one caveat. So there are certain buildings that have to do certain things.
Correct.
If you're not in that bucket, our recommendation is put something in your building. You don't want to just run your heating system on these old outdoor resets. They are truly not efficient. Our competition, our friends in the market,
whole world knows
have proven this at this point.
The whole world knows.
I mean, we're in 7,200 to 7,500 buildings. The rest of them compile another enormous amount of buildings. We've proven that that's the case. So
there's a track record and there's data that supports it.
Yeah. So from a bird's eye view, we try to we follow the local law guidance. We say do 25% of your building. That gives you a nice spread to put these sensors in. You get a nice spread of data. You know what the temperature is in your building, but it provides you additional points of data that you can use. To your point, you don't have to do it now, but there's things you can do in year 2, year 3, year 4, getting ready for some of these other deadlines, right? The big deadline was this year.
Right.
The next one's 2030.
2030, right?
So
32 or 30?
30, then 35.
Right. So you put in 25%, you're getting data now, you're reading it, and then you say, oh, wait a second, holy moly, excuse my French, I'm pissing away a lot of money. You know what? Hey, Patrick, come on back. Now that you got this data, let's put more points in. Let's understand what's happening. You made this part of the building efficient. We can make the rest of it efficient. And I think that's your point.
Yeah, and even things that, say, our system won't do, it will help you identify. So one of the big things I always like to point out to buildings is, especially the older buildings, right? Your older multifamily, your BSC class commercial. Yeah. When you put these sensors in, you have multiple lines, right? Your heating system, your cooling system, there's multiple pathways, right?
So you got risers, you don't
just have one loop, right? You have risers. So each riser operates in its own way.
Correct. Because it's its own loop.
And so by putting these sensors in, I know other people in the market, we try to map out these lines to give you the best idea of where are those inefficiencies in those lines.
So if it's here and it's reading 180, but then we get here and it's reading 140, there's an issue somewhere.
There's an issue. And so that's pointing you now to a service company or somebody else saying, listen, you need to
flush the system.
Look at new valves, look at new traps, look at this. Or look at better insulation. There's things you can do. Again, you don't have to do it all right now.
Gotcha.
You can put a system like this in, start to get all that data, and then look to the next solution. Say, okay, I did a year. This is the data I've got. Where do I look now?
Right. So again, your system reminds me of what my son does for a living. He's a business analyst, right? And a product analyst. And he works for a big company and he gets all this information from around the world and he's got to make a projection. How much are we going to sell this quarter? How much are we going to not? And he uses all this information to give to his boss for them to make these decisions. So your system basically says, hey, we're going to put these sensors in and we're going to help you optimize your system. And, it sounds simple. You'd think that everybody would do it, right? But it's hard to convince people to spend X without getting Y back.
Right.
And even if the initial investment and the return on the investment is always the hardest sell.
Yeah.
Right? And so now you go in, you get all this, goes in a database, you keep looking at it, and then you start working with the service company, with the maintenance people. Hey, your F&T traps are sticking. You're not getting the right steam. The lady's got the window open in this room. It's 55 in the dining room, and she's got it on 80 in the bedroom. What's going on? Well, the window's jammed open. They never closed it, right? So all of those things then start to create this pattern, this picture, this story.
Yep.
And then from there, your job is to go back to these management companies or maintenance facilities people and say, look, this is what we found. These are our ideas. And tell me how the system works. It's internet-based. You guys go in, you put it in, you set up a computer in the building. Is it all done remotely?
So it's kind of a combination. So all the sensors are wireless. We don't want any wiring. We want to be
of course.
in and out. Most installations, you know, I'm sure my operations team will not be happy with me, but most of them take about a day. Sometimes it goes over.
It depends on how many points you got and how difficult it's to
You got a wireless network that's all basically radio frequency down to your boiler room, which has the computer, has the hub, which is also monitoring all the assets, everything in that boiler room.
Pumps,
and that's
this, that, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you've got down there, we're monitoring either its status or its health in one way, shape, or form to make sure that there's not a imminent failure or there's not a trend that looks
For something ready to go.
yeah, like a yellow or an orange flag.
Right.
Like this isn't looking great. You should probably do something.
Something's wrong.
So that's what you got there. We always tie in a dedicated cellular line. So we bring that in to make sure communication
Like a fire alarm.
So
So
it's
you never
secured.
lose. Right.
It's secured. You don't have to worry about it. You never lose that connection. And if you do, like if Verizon goes down or something, we have built-in ways that it'll run without that, without our people
So
being
there's
able to see it.
backup.
So then behind the scenes, like in the cloud or in Runwise's office, we have people that are looking at these constantly, managing them, making changes, reaching
They're
out
in the
to
control
building.
room.
Exactly. They're the brains of the operation. Like I always, maybe I'm the face, but they're the brains for sure.
Right.
They're the ones that run all of that. But they're the ones that team is really the team that's going to say, let me look at this data, let me look at these trends, and let me quarterly, monthly, whatever it is, whatever the necessity is, let me reach out to these property managers or whoever it is to say, here's what we're seeing. Here's the trends. Here's, this sensor saw this sensor saw that.
Right, you put the pieces to the puzzle together.
Let's start to look at what your next steps are. Again, not really services we provide. We want to help them make that next
Right, so
decision.
you don't do the physical work. You just advise them on the suggestions,
Right,
or not even the suggestion. Hey, I think you got a problem. What is at 180 here and it's at 140 there? Something's not right.
Exactly.
Okay, so and then what? Other than that, is that really the main focus of the building? Is the heating side?
That's a big piece
Heating
of it.
and cooling?
Heating, cooling, that's a big piece of it. We try to say we're looking for any utility that's coming into your building, right? Because that's what 97 and all these laws are focusing on is reducing these utility usages. So heating and cooling obviously use gas or oil or
They're the
district
biggies.
steam, right? They're the big ones. Water, at least in New York, is the next biggest one. Water costs a ton of money. So another thing we try to look at is, again, you don't have the data. A lot of buildings just don't have data.
Right, they don't know they have leaks.
They have no idea that they have leaks. So another thing we try to say is bathrooms are they're the worst culprit of leaks, running toilets, sinks, whatever it is, and they go unchecked. Nobody hears that drip or nobody cares after a while.
Because they're not going into people's apartments every week to check it.
So putting a very easy sensor that monitors some of those lines, that could pick up what is costing you, $1,000, $10,000 a year.
I'm going to tell you a great story
stuff
about
like
that you could use in your sales. So as part of the show, I always try to put, some personal experiences in. And a lot of guests are very open about talking about their own professional experiences. So my wife and I and my children, we lived in a home in Stamford, Connecticut. That's when we left Queens, we moved there. And in July of 2024, we sold our home. And I bought another home that needed a complete renovation. So I said, well, I'm in the permit business. I have friends that are architects. I've built a few houses in my day. I said, this is perfect. And when I bought the house, I had to do a septic inspection. So we did the septic inspection, and the house is old. So I knew it was going to be in bad shape. The gentleman opens the cover. He looks. He goes, your septic shot. Closes the cover. which we kind of knew.
Yeah.
So we go, we get our building permit, and we started construction. And my plumber comes over, who's a friend of mine, and he starts cutting all the cast iron out because we're going to repipe the entire house. So we cut it. And as soon as we cut it, he cuts it. Nobody's been in the house. All the toilets been disconnected. Everything's been disconnected. And he goes and he walks away, and he goes to the truck to get some tools. He comes back down, and there's a huge puddle of clear water. And he goes, there's a leak somewhere, but we cut all the pipes out. How could we have a leak? So we can't figure it out because there's no water lines. All we have is the well water coming out of the well into the holding tank, into the booster tank, into the water softener system, and that's it. There's nothing else connected. So we're like, the valve's shut. We're like,
Where's
what
it coming
the F?
from? Yeah.
Right? So we start looking around, and off the water softener, we found a piece of 3/4 inch plastic flex pipe that was piped into the back of the waste by the wash machine. We found out that on the water softener, there's a bypass that has a pressure relief on it. Well, that thing was stuck for years. How it never burnt the pump out is amazing,
That's
right?
incredible, yeah.
And it pumped all the water into the septic. Well, the septic can't, if it's this much water for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there's no way that water can perk out.
That's that domino effect while your septic was gone.
So wait, the story gets better, Patrick. Now I'm thinking I got to spend 35 grand for a new septic system, right? I called the health department to come do the inspection for the new system. And the guy, I tell the inspector, I said, listen, we just found out that my pump has been running and the pump never burnt out. He goes, he goes, I don't know how that's possible. He goes, so he looks at it, he goes, it's perfect. You don't need a septic system. So there's a perfect example that's in the country, in a suburb where something is simple. Who would have ever known if you didn't have a monitor on that? I would have never known that thing was leaking.
Yeah.
And the previous tenant that was there for 2 years, I called him up. I said, was your tank always filled with clean water? He goes, yeah, I could never understand. I thought it was rainwater. It was
That's incredible.
Right? So there's a perfect example. And there, it's costing you some electricity, still wasted money. But in New York City, you're paying for that water.
Well, and so not even the bathroom water. If you look at the return lines, so your heating system lines, most of those lines go behind a wall or underground. Nobody ever sees them.
Right.
They go unseen for years.
Right, so if they got a drip.
I tell you, the amount of times we've installed, and day one, we pick up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gallons of new water going into that boiler every day.
Why?
Instantaneously, we pick up the phone and say, hey, you got a problem. And they're like, how'd you pick that up so fast? Like, well, we're monitoring the two ends, and they're not adding up.
Right, if it goes this much water went here, and we're only getting this much
Your
back.
condensate's coming, but you're only getting this much back. You're bringing in 300-400 gallons. There's something wrong.
Right.
And so the amount of times, and people are just like astounded. And because we've added a cost, unfortunately, to their building, but now we've saved them from something that could have been catastrophic years later.
Well, again, there's a cost for everything.
Exactly.
Nothing is for free. I mean, if you want data, you got to pay for it. That's the world we live in any business.
Yeah, so that's kind of it. And, we in the community at large that kind of do these building management systems, we're trying to follow along some of the local laws and some of the other things, because 97 is a big one. There are others that are starting to come out that will be aided by a smarter system.
That's just the evolution,
right? Like 157, the new natural gas leaks. I'm sure you've heard about that.
Yeah. But that's coming up in May.
Yeah. A lot of those people are saying, hey, how can I get alerts to my super that these things are going off? Like stuff like that.
Well, and again, that's one of the things that, we're going to do a newsletter on it, which is in May, it's starting, right?
Exactly.
And people are going to freak out. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I always worry about those, which we know because I'm old, is, people have a smoke alarm, they have a battery in it, it gives them a headache, and they rip it out. You know, I have tenants that did that to us, and I'm like, you know, that's against the law. I go, what are you doing? You live in there. If the battery was bad, why didn't you call us and we would have sent somebody? Or why don't you just go get a battery? And if you didn't want to do it, just so my fear is when they put these gas sensors, you know, they're not hardwiring them.
Nope.
You know, that's pretty scary.
I know.
Meanwhile, right now we don't have any.
No. And that's kind of what both ourselves at Runwise and others are saying, okay, how can we give that data to the building so they know if something's going on in the tenant space?
And it's funny that there was a gentleman who came on the podcast that their system does that.
Yeah.
It actually does the monitoring that the fire department uses to know whether they should open the door.
Right.
Because they can tell the volume of gas, I guess, or the pressure.
Yeah, there's something with the smoke and the quantity, like the parts per million and the pressure
Right.
and all that stuff. But every local law or every new thing that, you know, DOB or whoever comes out with, all the buildings folks, like once we're in these buildings, they're coming to us saying, okay, you've proven it on X. Like, how are you going to help us
do this?
with these other things?
So your business is going to evolve.
It is, and that's why, you know, where I sit with partners is just so powerful because we're always mind sharing with each other, right?
Course.
I know a bit about the electrical world and the heating world, right, from my background.
Right.
Other folks have different varying backgrounds. You have a different background, right?
And
sharing that
once
intel.
you share all the intel, you can make a
To me, that's the most important because we're getting certain data. Other people getting other amounts of data. The way we collaborate as a community is going to be the best investment for any building owner, in my opinion.
And the thing is that you're not. The other thing about your building is that the market isn't the Class A building.
No.
It's the landlord or the building owner who doesn't even know that their system is not operating at an optimal level.
Exactly.
Right. So that's always the sell, right? So a good friend of mine, he gets quoted. We're going to start to collect royalties from him. My good friend Andrew Peters from Curry and Brown, he's a cost estimator, and his job is to figure out what things cost without a set of plans, without anything, just using intel, right? His past history, and he has a saying that he's always looking in the windshield because it's a lot bigger than the rear view mirror. So he uses a little bit of history, but he goes forward. And all the guests, I always ask them the same question. In your world of energy efficiency, especially heating, give us a projection of where you think with the new local law and with the products that you put together, what do you think is the next major thing that's going to happen in this world about this data you're collecting and optimizing?
So to me, I think I kind of see two, especially in the heating, cooling, like the building, you know, controls world. I see two paths. I see one, which I think is a big ticket that everybody should do as it becomes more economical, is separating your heating or your cooling from your domestic water use. A lot of people still don't use that.
Right.
To me, that's an easy way to parse out one piece of something that says, okay, I'm going to do this, and you can electrify that, or you can do something separate with that. Heating systems is going to be very difficult to do that right now.
Right.
Incredibly costly, and I don't see it in the near future getting to a point where your multifamily buildings, your rental buildings, there's no capital for those big projects. So I think that the domestic hot water piece is one big piece. And you don't have to worry about it going unchecked because a lot of controls companies like Runwise will monitor that. Even if it's a separate system,
Correct.
we will keep
just
tabs
another bunch of sensors.
We'll keep tabs on that for you so you know you're not going to overheat or underheat or it's not failing, so you can separate them. I think that's a big ticket item. The other thing I think is you've got, whether you're putting in new controls, and I hope everyone is, I think the next piece is updating that old equipment, like you'd said about your house, finding that, what's that timeline and preparing that timeline now for when do I need to redo piping? When do I need a new boiler? When do I need a new pump? That capital expenditure, if you don't do that at the right time,
it costs you 3 times as much.
And the efficiencies of, we're only as good as the efficiency of the
course.
system. And so if the system isn't being updated and being optimized, your efficiencies will never get to that. We'll never get to that 2030 or 2035.
That's a perfect example, and that's
you know?
in a one-family house. You know, when I bought this house, it had air conditioning and it had a boiler. Well, the air conditioning system was probably from the 80s. We pulled it out.
Yep.
We kept the boiler. We ran hot water supply and return to a new HVAC system. And now we have up-to-date Freon running the AC. We have up-to-date motors.
Yeah.
We have up-to-date fans. That one change just took the efficiency from 1980 to 2020. It's 44 years of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't comprehend. And someone will say, well, the air conditioner still works. Yeah, it works, but it's working at like some crazy number.
Yeah.
So time goes by. And most people don't write, I'm a little weird, on my hot water heater, I used to write 2012. Warranty 2022. 2022, I changed my hot water heater because I knew in a few years I'd come home and find a flood, right? Same thing with the equipment. So you make a really great point that people think, oh, I spent $10,000 on this pump, it's going to last forever. No, it's got a life cycle.
Yeah.
And at some point, it goes from being really great and really efficient to really crappy and really inefficient.
And I think the common misconception that I'm seeing with 97 is I have to do these things. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm done. And it's like, well, no, you've done that. That's great. But now take that and say, okay, where am I looking for 5, 10 years? Like next year, you might not need to do anything, but you should start to prepare for when I get to that next point. What's that next point?
And what's it going to cost me? What's it going to what does it look like?
Yeah.
If I do it now, let's say costs go up 10, 20%. So now you delayed it 5 years. It cost you more, and you've been running inefficient for 5 years. So what did you really save?
I think that layers on even and God, we could go on forever for this, but that layers on to start your plan, right? Work with, it doesn't have to be me. If you have a consultant, if you have a friend that's an engineer or something, work with them and start to see, all right, here's what I've got. Here's all the components in my building. I've got these controls. I've got this data. But more importantly, what is the state or the city providing incentives for?
Right.
How
What's
can I
the financial side of it? Are there grants available? Are there tax deductions?
I can attest that they've changed years over years, and they usually go down or modify. It's only going to continue to happen.
Right.
So if you're considering this, or if you want to know what your path looks like,
it's available now. You don't want what's going to be available 4 or 5 years from now.
Or at the end of this year, when the next batch comes out, take a look at it and say, okay, this is going to be around for 4 years.
Could be better, could be worse.
What should we plan for next? So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. One of the things that I pride myself on the show is that I bring really great guests in, and you were awesome, Patrick, because it's not easy to explain all of this. It just people read it and they get feared by the dollar value, and it yes, in some cases it is very substantial, but there's other cases where you could do some small things, not spend a ton of money, but get more efficient and start lining yourself up for the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that was your point today.
Exactly.
So thank you for taking your busy schedule, coming in to see me,
Appreciate you having me.
and educating our team. So again, Patrick Beesley from Runwise. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great.